Elements of Nibbana. The discussion so far has focused on Nibbana as an absolute and transcendent quality. It is possible, however, to distinguish different kinds of Nibbana. Essentially, only one Nibbana exists. It is divided into categories in order to describe the characteristics of persons in contact with Nibbana, or to describe various properties of Nibbana itself. A widely known division of Nibbana from the Iti-Vuttaka is into two elements of Nibbana, Nibbana Dhatu. One, Sa Upadisesa Nibbana Dhatu, Nibbana with remaining Upadi fuel. And two, Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu, Nibbana with no remaining fuel. The commentaries define the distinguishing factor here, Upadi, as the five aggregates, Panchakanda, in the sense that they are governed by impure actions or are subject to grasping. The definitions of these terms based on this interpretation are: 1. Sa Upadisesa Nibbana Dhatu, Nibbana linked with the five aggregates, or Nibbana with the five aggregates still remaining. 2. Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu, Nibbana free from the five aggregates. Here is the passage where these two terms appear in the Iti-Vuttaka. This was said by the Blessed and fully enlightened one, so I have heard, bhikkhus. There are these two elements of Nibbana, namely Nibbana with fuel remaining and Nibbana with no fuel remaining. And what is the Nibbana with fuel remaining? Bhikkhus, there is the case of a monk who is an arahant with taints destroyed, who has lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached the true goal, destroyed the fetters of being, and is completely liberated through final knowledge. His five sense faculties still remain, and owing to their being intact, he experiences the agreeable and the disagreeable. He feels both pleasure and pain. His ending of lust, hatred and delusion is termed the Nibbana with fuel remaining. And what is the Nibbana with no fuel remaining? There is the case of an arahant with taints destroyed, who is completely liberated through final knowledge. For him all that is felt, Vedayita, not being delighted in, Anabhinandita, not being infatuated with, will become cool right here. This is termed Nibbana with no fuel remaining. The one with vision, secure and free, has proclaimed the dual elements of Nibbana. One element present and visible, Dita Dhammika, is called Nibbana with fuel remaining. Exhausted are the taints, conduits to renewed existence. The other, the supreme state, is Nibbana with no remaining fuel, in which all becoming totally ceases. This passage introducing the two elements describes the quality of association with Nibbana. That is, it describes Nibbana in connection to enlightened beings. It uses enlightened beings as a mean to understand Nibbana. It does not attempt to explain Nibbana in an absolute sense. This is because Nibbana is sandhitika, to be seen for oneself, and is pachatang veditabang vinyuhi, to be experienced individually by the wise. As mentioned earlier, therefore, this Therefore, this division of Nibbana does not introduce anything different or mysterious into the earlier examination of the nature of Nibbana. As the commentators say, Nibbana is essentially invisible. The division is a didactic tool. Before looking more closely at the two kinds of Nibbana, let us familiarize ourselves with three important terms. 1. Vedayita. This term stems from the same root as Vedana, and in some cases it is used as a substitute for Vedana. It refers to sense experience or to sense impressions. Here the plural is Vedayitani, which refers to all objects that have been sensed or cognized. It is equivalent to what people nowadays refer to as their whole range of experience. Nibbana Dita. This term used above as a qualifying adjective for Vedanayita is derived from Abhinayadita, which means pleasing or delightful. In this context, Abhinayadita implies infatuation and a heart adulterated by craving, and it applies to both positive and negative experiences, to delight and aversion. Adding the negative prefix and the meaning becomes not infatuated. In this case, craving does not accompany sense impressions. Sense experience occurs in a pure, spacious and unobstructed way, free from fretting and brooding. One does not distort or deviate from direct sense experience, because the mind is not controlled or overwhelmed by greed, hatred and delusion. See, Dita Dhammika, literally this word means visible or visible object. In reference to time, it means in the present or in this life. In reference to objects or mental states, it means common, mundane, basic, material or exterior. It is generally paired with samparayika, which literally means further or beyond. In relation to time, it means future, later, beyond this life, or in the next world. In other contexts, it means transcendent, supreme, sacred, spiritual, or internal. At this point, let us look more closely at the two kinds of Nibbana. Sa upadisesa Nibbana Dhatu refers to Nibbana connected to the five aggregates. It is the Nibbana of Arahants as they cognize sense objects, pleasurable and painful, through the senses. Cognition is inextricably linked with the five aggregates. The five aggregates are directly involved in sense experience, and the aggregates themselves become further objects of cognition. This aspect of Nibbana highlights Arahant's contact with the world. It focuses on the end of greed, hatred and delusion, which leads to an unobstructed experience of life. Sa upadisesa Nibbana Dhatu is the Arahant's liberated state of mind, free from defilements. Arahants are not influenced by defilements, and therefore sense contact does not give rise to craving, either as coveting or aversion. Additionally, no craving exists that leads to renewed existence, bhavaneti. An Arahant with unimpaired sense faculties is thus able to receive sense impressions freely and with wisdom. This free state of mind has two facets. The first is the ability to receive sense impressions as pure feeling, Vedana, since there are no residual attachments or obsessions to interfere. The second is not being overwhelmed by experience, and thus one does not form future habits of attachment or infatuation. For arahants, this is the ordinary, usual state of mind. It is immediate and accessible in every moment of sense contact. Therefore it is called Dittadhamma, visible or immediate. This type of Nibbana is the state of arahants while they are still alive and in contact with the external world. Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu is the Nibbana independent of the five aggregates. It is the Nibbana beyond the process of experiencing phenomena through the five senses, or over and above the five aggregates engaged in cognition. It is the Nibbana transcending mundane reality, transcending sense contact and experience. In other words, Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu is the essential nature of Nibbana, which is revealed to arahants when experience, by way of the five senses, ceases. When cognition ceases, or when there is no involvement with sense contact, including input from the five senses, still remaining in the mind. An arahant receives sense impressions without craving-induced delight, abhiyanadita, without the inflaming, ignorant influence of greed, hatred, and delusion. Sense impressions do not linger and smoulder, they become cool, siti bhavishanti. They become completely peaceful and detoxified, and they are unable to lead to further birth or becoming. Arahants are capable of neutralizing any obstructive potential of sense experience, cooling and mastering it. They therefore acquire the epithet Siti Bhuta or Sita, meaning one who is cooled. This state of clarity, absence of residual sense experience, is internal and personal. It is the state of non-becoming or of no renewed existence. In this state, where the five aggregates are no longer objects of awareness, arahants thus have Nibbana as their object. They realize Nibbana as a Dhammayatana. This quality can only be discussed in its relational context. By saying that ordinary mundane experience ceases, the essential absolute nature of Nibbana can only be seen and realized for oneself. An analogy of this division of Nibbana is to being shipwrecked in the ocean. An unenlightened person is swimming, struggling against the waves and currents. A person who has realized Nibbana has reached dry land. The arrival at land where one is perfectly satisfied and at ease is like Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu. The absence of oppression and danger, not being battered by the waves, being able to engage with things freely, being able to move about as one wishes, is like Sa Upadisesa Nibbana Dhatu. One can also compare an unenlightened person to someone suffering a fever. An unenlightened person is someone who has recovered from fever, or is in perfect health. Good health is inherently complete. When one is healthy, one knows this state for oneself. The contentment, joy, ease, and relief is purely subjective. Others observing from outside may conjecture on that state, but they are unable to experience it directly. The state of well-being is like Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu, the related condition which affects behaviour and influences a person's surroundings, that is, of not being oppressed or impeded by illness, and being able to act as one wishes, is like Sa Upadisesa Nibbana Dhatu. To summarise, there is only one Nibbana, but with two aspects. One aspect, Sa Upadisesa Nibbana Dhatu, focuses on the end of defilements, which has a bearing on the relationship to the outside world or in everyday life. The second, Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu, is limited to Nibbana's essential nature, which is realized solely by enlightened beings. It cannot be fathomed by way of the five senses, and is beyond experience, confined to the five aggregates. In other words, in Sa Upadisesa Nibbana Dhatu, arahants of the five aggregates as the object of attention. In Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu, arahants of Nibbana as the object of attention. To say Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu is Nibbana's essential nature is compatible with the commentarial opinion found in the Paramatta Dipani, which describes Amata Maha Nibbana Dhatu, deathless Nibbana element, as Anupadisesa, with no remaining fuel. It is also consistent with the Buddha's words. Monks, there exists that sphere, ayatana, where there is neither earth, water, fire, or air elements, nor the realm of infinite space. Elsewhere, the commentaries and sub-commentaries point out that Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu is identical to Anupada Nibbana, final absolute Nibbana, which is the goal of Dhamma practice and comprises the highest realization in Buddhism. In most cases, cognition by way of the five senses and contact with the external world clearly and decisively ends at death. With the utter end of sense contact at death, arahants realize the indivisible aspect of Nibbana, i.e. Anupadisesa Nibbana. Colloquially, the term Anupadisesa Nibbana is used as an expression for the death of an arahant. From a word denoting quality, Anupadisesa Nibbana came to refer to an action or event. Where this word is found elsewhere in the scriptures, it refers to the death of the Buddha or of the arahants. As for the term Sa Upadisesa Nibbana in the Tipitaka, it is not used to describe an event, and is found only in this one passage of the Iti Vuttaka. There are synonyms of Sa Upadisesa Nibbana that are used frequently. There are many passages in the Tipitaka where the term Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu is used alone. For example, in the Buddha's comparison of the Dhamma Vinaya to the marvels of the ocean, just as in the great ocean neither a decrease nor an increase will appear, though rain falls into it from the sky. Even so, even if many monks attain final Nibbana in the Nibbana element, that is without remainder, there is no decrease or increase in the Nibbana element, that is without remainder. The Maha-Nidesa refers to Anupadisesa Nibbana as Anabhinibhati Samagi, meaning fully prepared to not be reborn. The accounts in the Pali Canon of the Buddha's life frequently use the term Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu, each time in reference to the Buddha's final Nibbana at death. For example, the Buddha claimed that his complexion is particularly resplendent on two occasions: on the night of his enlightenment and on the day of his final Nibbana in the Nibbana element without remainder. Alms food offered to the Buddha is exceptionally meritorious on two occasions: the meal offered before his enlightenment and the meal before his final Nibbana in the Nibbana element without remainder. There are further examples. The location of the Buddha's final Nibbana and the Nibbana element without remainder is one of the 4 Buddhist holy places. The Buddha's final Nibbana and the Nibbana element without remainder is one cause for the earth to quake. Another passage explains that the Buddha is called the Tathagata because between the night in which the Buddha gains supreme enlightenment and in the night in which he attains the Nibbana element without remainder, whatever he proclaims, says or explains is so and not otherwise. There are many other scriptural passages with similar theme and an identical sequence to the teaching on the 2 kinds of Nibbana above. The only difference is that they do not distinguish these kinds of Nibbana. For the sake of comparison, here are some examples. When a bhikkhu has abandoned ignorance and aroused true knowledge, then, with the discarding of ignorance and the arising of true knowledge, he does not generate a meritorious volitional formation or a demeritorious volitional formation, or an imperturbable volitional formation. Since he does not generate or fashion volitional formations, he does not cling to anything in the world. Not clinging, he is not agitated. Not being agitated, he personally attains Nibbana. He understands, destroyed his birth, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. If he feels a pleasant feeling, he understands it is impermanent. He understands it is not indulged in. He understands it is not delighted in. Anabinyadita. If he feels a painful feeling, he understands it is impermanent. He understands it is not indulged in. He understands it is not delighted in. If he feels a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, he understands it is impermanent. He understands it is not indulged in. He understands it is not delighted in. If he feels a pleasant feeling, he feels it detached. If he feels a painful feeling, he feels it detached. If he feels a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, he feels it detached. If he feels a feeling limited by the body, by way of the 5 physical sense doors, he understands. I feel a feeling limited by the body. When he feels a feeling limited by life, by way of the mind door, he understands. I feel a feeling limited by life, he understands. With the breakup of the body, following the exhaustion of life, all that is felt, aveda itani, not being delighted in, anabinyadita, will become cool right here. At the 12 sense spheres, mere bodily remains will be left. Suppose, bhikkhus, a person would remove a hot clay pot from a potter's kiln and set it on smooth ground. Its heat would be dissipated right there, and the fired pot would be left. So too, when he feels a feeling limited by the body, limited to life, he understands. With the breakup of the body following the exhaustion of life, all that is felt, to not being delighted in, will become cool right here. Merely bodily remains will be left. Bhikkhus, just as an oil lamp burns in dependence on the oil and the wick, and with the exhaustion of the oil and the wick it is extinguished through lack of fuel, so too when a bhikkhu feels a feeling limited to the body, limited to life, he understands. With the breakup of the body following the exhaustion of life, all that is felt, not being delighted in, will become cool right here. There is, however, one passage with a varying description and analogy. The monk whose heart is perfectly released attains 6 constant abiding states. Seeing a form with the eye, he is neither elated nor depressed, but rests equanimous, mindful and clearly comprehending, hearing a sound with the ear, smelling a scent with the nose, tasting a savour with the tongue, contacting a tangible object with the body, cognizing mental states with the mind. He is neither elated nor depressed, but rests equanimous, mindful and clearly comprehending. When he feels a feeling limited by the body, he understands a feeling limited by the body. When he feels a feeling limited by life, he understands a feeling limited by life. He understands with the breakup of the body, following the exhaustion of life, all that is felt, not being delighted in, will become cool right here. Suppose that a shadow is cast by a tree. Along comes a man with an axe and basket and cuts the tree at the trunk. He then digs and pulls out the roots, even the rootlets and root fibres. He chops that tree into logs, and having done so, chops the logs into chips. The chips he dries in wind and sun, then burns them in fire and makes an ash heap. The ashes he winnows in a strong wind and lets them be carried away by a swiftly flowing river. The shadow cast by the tree is cut off by the root, made like a palm tree stump, made not to become again, of a nature not to arise again. In the same way, a monk whose heart is perfectly released attains 6 constant abiding states. All that is felt, not being delighted in, will become cool right here. For a thorough understanding of the 2 kinds of Nibbana, let us go back and examine the commentarial explanations, as mentioned earlier. The term Anupadisesa Nibbana is used in the Pali Canon to describe an event, the death of an arahant, in particular of the Buddha. However, the commentaries began to use the term Sa Upadisesa Nibbana to describe an event as well, as can be seen by comparing 2 passages describing the same event. Pali Canon. These 2 almsgivings are of very great fruit, of very great results, more fruitful and advantageous than any other. Which 2? The one is the almsgiving, after eating which the Tathagata attains supreme enlightenment. The other, that after which he attains the Nibbana element without remainder at his final passing. Commentary. The Buddha, having eaten the alms food offered by Sujata, attained the supreme enlightenment of the Nibbana element with remainder. Having eaten the alms food offered by Kunda, he attained the Nibbana element without remainder at his final passing. With the development of meaning of these 2 terms, they were applied in many commentarial passages to indicate events in the life of the Buddha or the Arahants. They are used to emphasize the realization of certain states rather than the nature of the states themselves. From the commentarial perspective, the meaning of these 2 kinds of Nibbana is restricted. Sa Upadisesa Nibbana here refers to the extinguishing of defilements with the 5 aggregates remaining. To the Nibbana of an Arahant while still alive, that is, to the attainment of Arahantship. Anupadisesa Nibbana refers to ending of defilements with no aggregates remaining, that is, to the death of an Arahant. The commentators define Anupadisesa Nibbana in particular by applying the principle of final mind or final consciousness, limiting the meaning to refer to an Arahant's death. The commentaries interpret canonical passages relating to Arahants by distinguishing between Sa Upadisesa Nibbana and Anupadisesa Nibbana, for example from the Canon. Because of the utter end of craving, it its remainderless fading away and cessation, and this is Nibbana. For a monk who has thus been quenched, free from grasping, there is no renewed birth. The commentaries assert that the first sentence of this passage refers to the Nibbana element without remainder. The second sentence refers to the Nibbana element without remainder. This interpretation accords with the canonical passages presented earlier. Combining these commentarial explanations, we can summarize the meaning of these two kinds of Nibbana as follows. The Nibbana element with remainder is the end of defilement and craving, leading to harmless, peaceful and beneficial interaction with the world, and relates to awakening or arahantship. The Nibbana element without remainder is the end of being bound to the five aggregates of mental proliferation, of birth and continued existence, and it relates to the end of life in the world. The Nibbana relating to the activity of the five sense faculties is Sa-upadisesa Nibbana. The Nibbana free from the five sense faculties is Anupadisesa Nibbana. In short, the end of defilement is Sa-upadisesa Nibbana. The end of birth is Anupadisesa Nibbana. The first term refers to the Nibbana of an arahant who is still alive. All mental impurities have been removed, but the five aggregates still exist. This corresponds with the term coined by the commentators, Kilesa Parinibbana, eradication of defilements. The second term refers to the Nibbana of an arahant after death, corresponding with the commentarial term Kanda Parinibbana, release from the aggregates. In fact, the evidence in the Pali Canon shows that not much significance was given to these two kinds of Nibbana. What are highlighted are the things that can be applied to realize Nibbana clearly for oneself. Lengthy theorizing on these two kinds of Nibbana is likely to complicate a matter that is actually straightforward, and may lead to students of Buddhism overemphasizing their importance. If the examination of the nature of Nibbana becomes too technical, there is the risk that people will form misleading conceptions. This is because the person presenting the explanation may not translate important words accurately and clearly, and the person receiving and teaching may have limited understanding about terms or points of Dhamma. The misunderstanding may be reinforced by people's emotions. For example, one may read the technical terms above and form an impression of an arahant as someone heartless and indifferent. Therefore, to prevent such misunderstandings, it is important to accompany the study of theoretical teachings with practical application, to see how theory and practice complement one another. An examination into the essential meanings of the theoretical teachings and their expression as real human attributes reveals how these teachings, which may at first seem contradictory, are compatible and mutually supportive.